Okay, good morning. So we are in the week of October 12th to the 15th. We're covering special senses. Let's see. So yes, we are covering special senses and endocrine system. So on Wednesday, we'll have a quiz over the nervous system. Okay. So going over what we went over last week. So if you review the study guide images for last week, you should be good to go. All right. So let's go into the study guide and look at, all right, so special senses starts on page 10. So 1 through 9 would be your studying for the quiz. Okay. All right. So structures of the eye are some things you'll need to know. And let me switch over to, for those that are here with us, so they can see it on the screen. So structures that you need to know about the eye. So basically you need to know the eye has muscles that control its movement. You won't need to know the actual names of each muscle. They learn that in AP1, but for this class, you just need to know that there are muscles surrounding the eye, that they're eye muscles. You also may be able to see this yellow line going up here. That is the optic nerve. So if y'all remember from last week, we learned about some cranial nerves, and one of them was the optic nerve, and it met on the underside or the inferior surface of the brain. Okay, it formed that optic chiasma. So basically, this is the connection between the eye and the optic chiasma going to the brain. Okay, so your eyes sense information it sees, sends a signal to the optic nerve to the brain. Okay. Next, on the exterior surface of the eye, some structures you need to know. So in the center, you may already know this, but this is your pupil. Okay. So depending on how much light is either constricted or dilated, the colored part of the eye gives you your eye color. That's the iris. Okay, and the white part of your eye, right? So think back to American history. You know, you said, you know, don't shoot till you see the whites of their eyes. That's the sclera, right? So white part of your eye is the sclera. Okay, more structures you need to know. So obviously you know it's your nostril, but did you know that you have a lacrimal gland here on the lateral side of your eye, and it secretes tears. So this is a lacrimal duct, okay? And those tears can actually, some of those can actually secrete fluid, and they can actually, some of it can go through your nostril, okay? Some of it obviously will run down your eye, right? But some will flow down through your nostril. All right. So if we were to take essentially a sagittal section down the eye, we'll see a few more structures. Okay. So surrounding the iris and the pupil is the cornea. Okay. So let's see that there. Okay, here's your pupil and your iris. So the pupil, while we see it as a black dot, it's really an opening. Okay. And that opening is allowing your lens to get light and perceive information. Okay, and that lens can be stretched or relaxed via, there's muscles here and ligaments here. Okay, on more of the external surface, again, is your sclera. Okay, another layer in between, or next layer that's deeper is the choroid. Okay, you got some blood vessels there. Then you've got your retina in the back of the eye. Okay, and your retina is where you're going to find your rods and your cones. We talked about that in the lecture a little bit. Okay. All or the rods are sensitive to light, and your cones are sensitive to color. Back here is your optic nerve. Here you have your central artery and vein, the retina. Okay, your eye does need a blood supply. Okay. All right, so you've got, talked about vision. Now let's transition to hearing. Okay. So for hearing, now look at some more structures. Okay. So this is your tympanic membrane. So when sound goes through your external acoustic meatus, okay, those sound waves hit the tympanic membrane or your eardrum. Okay, that vibration is going to move your ossicles. Okay, these are little tiny bones in your inner ear. Okay, that's going to send signals to your semicircular canal. It's called semicircular because you have these three semicircles, right? So from there, information goes to the vestibule, the cochlea, okay, and then on to this vestibular cochlear nerve. Okay, you don't really need to know the name of that nerve, but basically, here's another cranial nerve going to the brain. Okay, so you're taking sound waves, converting it into electrical signals that are perceived by nerves. Okay. So that's hearing. So I'd like to take a break right now. So talked about vision, talked about hearing. So I want you to kind of look over your images you've got in your study guides here, as well as the models that are at your table. I want you to try to find them. Okay. So I'll give you about 3 minutes to do that. And even if you're at home, you can be looking at your study guide and reviewing the structures. All right, so we've covered vision, we've covered hearing. Let's cover smell. Our fancy anatomy word for smell is olfaction. Everybody say olfaction. Olfaction. All right. So anytime you see olfactory, we're talking about smell. So structures you need to know. We talked a little bit about the olfactory bulb. Okay. That's also another part of the olfactory tract. That's part of the cranial nerve as well. Okay. You can see that. So here's your nasal cavity or nasal passages, and you've got these nerves and olfactory receptors that extend down from the olfactory bulb. Okay, and these are, basically specialized neurons, right? We've learned about neurons last week. Okay, as air is being inhaled and it's passing by those receptors, and those receptors have essentially smaller receptors on them that can have different chemicals attached to them. And when that happens, they send the action potential up to the olfactory bulb, which then sends a signal to the brain. So it allows you to perceive what you're smelling. These big cells around those receptors, or receptor cells, are olfactory epithelial cells. Why? Because they are lining a surface. Isn't that what epithelial cells do? Remember when we learned about epithelium? They line surfaces. Okay. So the olfactory bulb, the olfactory tract, okay, you don't really see the tract in this picture, but it extends essentially toward the brain. Okay, so you get a signal from those olfactory receptor cells to the olfactory bulb to the olfactory tract to the brain. Okay. Right here.
Shows it more in the book. It shows it more up close to the nose.
Oh, this part. Be closer to.
The darker area. That's what it's showing.
So this over here.
It's showing this is the nasal cavity.
Yes, all of that is nasal cavity. So from here all the way, like all of this. So not just right here, it's from here on.
Oh, okay, so this is part of the nasal cavity.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's like you're breathing, air comes up, so it follows the foot.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Now, so we talked about, again, talked about vision, we talked about hearing, we talked about olfaction. Let's talk about gustation. Gustation is our fancy anatomy word for taste. Everybody say gustation. All right. So obviously, you know, this is your tongue, right? So you didn't need a class to tell you that, right? So what you do have on your tongue on the surface are papillae. And you have different kinds of papillae. Okay. So here's a certain kind of papillae in the back of your tongue. And then if you were to look at that in higher magnification, you can see down here on the deep surface, those are where your taste buds are. Okay. But the ridges are, you know, basically elevated points. These are all papillae. And then these little cells here are your taste buds. Those are your receptor cells. Okay, so you're eating, your food gets broken down and gets into those little crevices. Those taste bud cells have receptors on them. They interpret it and tell your brain that something tastes sweet or salty or, you know, some bitter, sour, umami, exactly. Yeah. It can be a collection of bacteria. I mean, the reality is we all have some. I mean, it's the, you know, gross thing about us is that we carry bacteria on us every day, even though we think we're clean. So I would say I can't really say yet, well, definitively good or bad. I think a lot of people live with bacteria on their tongue and don't have negative consequences other than maybe bad breath. So because part of it's food, part of it is, you know, just the waste products that the bacteria are making in your mouth. I know it sounds like not what you want to hear today, but so you're like, I shouldn't have asked that, but you know, it's just some people get more of it than others, but yeah, in most cases it's not life-threatening. But that is special senses. So again, just making sure you understand where the olfactory tract and olfactory bulb are. Receptor cells and olfactory epithelial cells, your papillae, and your taste buds. Okay? So we are going to conclude with discussion of the endocrine system. So with the endocrine system, an endocrine gland is a gland that secretes hormones. Okay, and they're essentially going through some, you know, they're basically being released through an endocrine gland as opposed to just sort of being released through a duct. Okay, so these are usually ductless glands. Okay, so these are not like, say, the sweat gland, right? Sweat goes through the sweat gland up to the surface of the skin. All right, so these are more direct. And also these hormones serve as chemical messengers. We'll learn about that in the lecture today, but they're chemicals and they have a specific function in regulating homeostasis in your body. Who remembers what homeostasis is? It's what? Keeping your body in balance, equilibrium, okay? So we're not going to get away from homeostasis, okay? We're going to keep talking about it. So, in fact, as you go through your careers in healthcare, you're going to be talking about imbalances and equilibrium, right? So that's what happens when people get sick. So once you know the locations, okay, for lab, we're going to get into the functions in lecture, okay? But for a lab, you want to be able to, if I show you a picture like this, you ought to be able to identify, if I don't have the labels on it as letters or numbers, you ought to be able to tell me what gland it is. Okay, so little dot back here is your pineal gland, okay? This ridge here, more anterior, is the hypothalamus, okay? Here's your pituitary gland. In your throat area, you got your thyroid gland, as well as these nodules. These are the parathyroid glands, okay, located essentially on top of the thyroid gland, or superficial. Okay, the chest, pectoral area, you've got your thymus. This superior to the kidneys, you have your adrenal gland. Okay, you also have your pancreas in your abdominal area. Okay, and your reproductive organs are also, they're in the reproductive system, but also in the endocrine system because they release hormones. So females have ovaries and males have testes. Okay? So that essentially for lab what you need to know about the endocrine system. Okay. So I'm going to give you a moment to kind of review some of those, practice with yourself. There are, and I'll get you in just a moment. So I think we have some purpose games on this. Also practice anatomy lab and mastering. If you go to mastering in the lecture, you can access practice anatomy lab. You can practice this as well. But that is our discussion for today.